Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're coming from. My name's Matt Dias, and I am the Vice President of Partnerships at Via Transportation. And welcome to the Inside City Hall series. And as you may or may not know, this is a new series where we talk to city and transit agency leadership, kind of the individuals behind the scenes that are working and planning and implementing transit systems across the country. And we talk about different types of elements that they're facing, challenges and opportunities in unique circumstances. And I'm pleased to welcome today Jacob Laurence. Welcome, Jacob. Thank you for joining us. Jacob's the Deputy Director of Administrative Services for the city of Mobile, Alabama. And I guess just to jump off, Jacob, would you mind just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the community of Mobile, maybe the structure of government, the size, the scope? That'd be great for us to get started.
Would love to. Jacob Laurence, Administrative Services Deputy Director. What does that mean? I wear a lot of hats, transit being among them. I'm a 20-year employee of the city of Mobile. Started off on the more creative end of the spectrum in museum work, shifted over to the city's uh, real estate portfolio, then shifted into finance, where I think that somebody kind of took notice that I have a lot of ability to do some very detailed work. And when I shifted over to administrative services, it was, hey, we also want you to tackle transit. And I say tackle
Wow.
lovingly because we do know that there were a number of issues that we'll get into actually in this session. Um, Mobile itself is the only port city in the state of Alabama. So we are the only city that is linked to a river and a bay and the Gulf of Mexico. So it makes us a unique community in Mobile's greater area, much less the state. Having said that, we are 140 square miles, 200,000, probably a little bit above now. We just went through an annexation, so 200,000 plus in our population. And we have a mayor city council form of government since
Mm.
1985. And so we've got the mayor who will run all the operations and the administrative wing of it. And then we have the city council who are the policy approvers.
And maybe you could tell for our listeners a little bit about what was occurring in Mobile when you took over leadership of the transit agency and the transit authority. I am aware that Mobile actually has one of the oldest transit authority or agencies in the entire state. I think it's almost 100 years, believe it or not. Started as a maritime service, moving people around, and then became a light rail service, believe it or not, way back in the day, and then converted to a bus service. And now it seems like you're sort of at the next echelon of growth and development of the system. So maybe you could tell us, like, sort of when you came over, what were some of your initial observations? What are the things that you saw that made you contemplate taking things a different direction?
Sure. Rewind to finance for a second. When I got into finance, I was asked to review all of the city's systems, utilities, a number of things that over the years had been paid out, but had not really had that level of detailed analysis that is necessary for any system to be healthy. When it got to transit, it was a very quick understanding that we were extremely over budget uh, to the tune of
Mm,
probably $1 billion annually. And it just, you can't function that way, especially when your service was at double digit deficiencies. So we have a huge overrunning cost, and the service just wasn't working. Our relationship between the service provider and the union was contentious. We'll just leave it like that.
mm,
And so there were a lot of opportunities to figure out a way to do things better, which is why we as the city said, you know what, we're no longer going to ask the transit entity, which we had had in place for 20 something years, to continue to serve as the middleman between the management company that came in as the contractor on top of it to run it and then have it flow through to the city. What we decided to do was to disband the transit agency, and we brought the entire operation back under the uh, really control of the mayor and the city of Mobile, specifically through the
Mm.
administrative services department. So it was a big undertaking, and there were a lot of people that were really scared about, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Well, we didn't know what it meant. What we knew is that we could not continue to operate at that level of deficit on both sides of the equation and have a successful system.
Well, I think that probably, for the benefit of our listeners, in the public sector, that takes some guts. Bringing an agency or maybe a kind of quasi-independent agency back under the authority or the accountability level of the mayor's office and the ministerial team. I mean, that comes with its pros and cons. And sometimes in the public sector, as you well know, it's easy to sort of take the safe way out. So I appreciate the fact that running an operational deficit, not necessarily very positive labor relations, and then declining ridership, those things taken together, sort of contemplating the risk versus reward. I appreciate the fact that people in your community and yourself had the ability to sort of stand up and say, okay, we are ready to take the weight of this on our shoulders. And so, having worked in government myself as the city manager for 20 or 25 years, when things like this occur, I know how important structure is. Structure is sort of the foundation of having transparent, accountable, outcomes-based agreements or partnerships in the public sector or in the private sector. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit. So once you determine that the risk was worth the rewards, that you're going to take the accountability and bring the structure to yourself and the mayor's office, what was like the models you were contemplating, and what were the things that you maybe wanted to accomplish differently?
So we knew that the traditional model was not going to work. Fixed route with complementary paratransit in this day and age, when you have competing interests like Uber and Lyft and things like that, we knew that we were already against a stacked deck. So we knew
Mm.
we had to do something differently to engage individuals that felt like fixed route was too far from their residence, from their place of work. And so when we determined that we needed to go to the multimodal form of transportation and include microtransit, it was a game changer.
Mm.
Luckily, we had been introduced to VIA, who had been in the city for a pilot program for 1 year ahead of that in a very small confined area of like 21 square miles. And it was doing incredibly well. So obviously, we already had a peek behind the curtain of what could happen if we expanded it as a third approach to transit across the entire city, which is exactly what we did. So when we wrote the RFP, we said we no longer want direct operator provided services. We, in fact, want purchased transportation. And even though we are the FTA recipient, we then turn around and do third party cost of contracting with VIA to make sure that they are doing all the turnkey management and operations of the entire system. So it's directly tied to us specifically through me. I do a lot of oversight on a daily basis for transit, especially right now because we're getting ready to launch the redesigned system.
Right.
But in doing that, we also feel that we have given VIA the opportunity to really flex into what they do best, which is data driven transit. And so we have relied heavily on their platform, on their expertise. There's all different types of experts across the staffing pattern, and it's just amazing to be able to pick and choose who you need on any one day to go, oh, we need this, we need that, and there's always somebody that can come forth with the answer. So to your point, we did an RFP that
Okay.
became multimodal that had for the first time ever said turnkey management. And then everything else after that was really kind of straightforward, nuts and bolts of how do you go through a solicitation process. We put it out, we waited 6 weeks, we did our selection committee, and unanimously, VIA got very, very high marks. And across the board, everybody said, well, yeah, of course, this is the obvious answer based on the criteria we had put in.
Now, I also know as a former city manager that administerial, we can make it look easy. I mean, when we're talking about this, that sounds very elegant, but I understand that these situations are dynamic and they have lots of employee impacts, they have media impacts, they have political impacts, they had administrative impacts throughout your organization. And so, for your listeners, someone as bold as you or ready to lead as you and lean in, sees these issues, willing to take the accountability, issue an RFP. So, what was the hardest, or what are some of the hard parts of that, or what are some of the challenges that they might expect that you
So
experienced?
the challenges that I experienced, and I try to find nice nuggets on how to explain really complex things. It simply comes down to when I volunteered for this, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I still don't know what I don't know. And so the
Mm,
beautiful part of it is that it's a constant learning experience. What I know is that we wanted a very particular outcome. And so far from where we were to where we are trying to get, everything has clicked into place. But that has taken a lot of really detailed day-to-day management and honestly some very long days that run very much into the evening hours where you just can't turn it off because there is not enough hours in the day to get all of these things solved, especially when, as an organization like the city, we had lost kind of the intellectual property on what it was to run a transit agency. And so we are kind of behind the eight ball in that we now need to relearn all of these things. What we found out is once we had abolished the transit agency and pulled everything back underneath the city, a number of our long-term, uh, real key players in what it took to run it that were a part of that chose to move on or retire. And that
mm.
created its own wrinkle where a lot of the information that we needed left. So we wish them well along their way, whether it was into retirement or new parts of their career. And obviously, no harm or foul. They had to do what they had to do. But the truth of the matter is these gaps were then the big areas that I am constantly with, kind of a mental map, kind of going through and going, okay, I need to fill this in. We need to get this. The city needs to know how to do this, and to build out a new playbook that over the course of this first year then guides what we try to do for the next 20 years.
And that makes me think about like looking ahead the next 5 to 20 years. So what are you most proud of when you're able to sort of sit there and have a cup of coffee or reflect on the weekend? What sort of makes you so proud of how this all came together? And then maybe something, an element or two that's next that you're also looking forward to and that's sort of bright spots on the horizon.
What I like is that we took a broken system, provided it a little bit of attention that perhaps was sorely overdue and needed uh, for the system to just kind of have that opportunity to get back to what was right, what is right for it to function in the future. So I'm really proud of that so far. I'm proud that over the last 9 months, we have seen double-digit increases in on-time performance. Everything is data-driven. Uh,
Mm,
the the VOC, which is the VIA platform, if you guys are not familiar with it, I would highly recommend start trying to get in touch with it, figure it out. It is crucial to our ability to make decisions that are now future looking. The city is on the precipice of relaunching the redesigned system and network in July of this year. So we're just a couple of months away from that. And so it's exciting to know that what we're about to see is the culmination of 9 months of contracted work and then back it up probably 15 months worth of work even before we were in the contract, and know that it's actually all coming together. Labor and our operator now. I mean, just it's amazing the symmetry and the synchronicity and the good relations all the way across. What used to be, I would say, one or two complaints a day is now a complaint maybe once a month. And that's
wow.
incredible to me. I mean, that is just absolutely the quintessential thing to be able to say, we know we're doing it right because the public outcry is no longer there. And this is a system for our public. And so I kind of
And
feel confident that we're really on the right track.
yeah, will you just tell us a little bit more about that? I know you have a big announcement coming up in July, so maybe we just spend a minute there. And I think it involved a lot of stakeholder outreach, contemplating redesigning elements of the system, rebranding. I recall those are sort of the three high spots. But if you could just summarize that real quick.
Of course. So, community outreach has been going on. We've gotten the 90% route redesign, inclusive of microtransit, in place. The community outreach helped us fill in that last maybe 8%. So, we're probably never going to have 100% design because you always have to go back and tweak it. So, obviously, if
Hmm.
we're within a 2% margin, I feel very comfortable that what we
Yeah.
have provides the incremental changes to keep the current system relevant to those that are transit dependent, but also turns around and offers new opportunities for riders that might not have otherwise contemplated transit in their regular life. So the big announcement is that the city of Mobile will launch what is known as second line transit. So
Mm.
that's the name of our new transit system that will go
Oh,
live.
fantastic.
Yeah, sometime in July. We don't have the exact number on it yet. I'm tending to believe that it's going to probably be more towards the tail end of July, but that's fine. It's exactly where we expected it to be. And second line, for anybody that doesn't know it, has a double meaning here. For transit folks, it means multimodal transportation. So awesome
Yeah.
that we are now a multimodal uh, system, and we've given a tip of the hat there. But for people in the South who know Mobile culture, a second line parade is a part of the Mardi Gras tradition that we uh,
Ah,
share in. And so it is a tip of local culture and transit terminology blended into one to make a fun, funky, new
yeah.
system that's completely rebranded. And so all the buses will get completely stripped down and rewrapped. And so, I mean, just everything about it will feel different, but very much the same, only improved in all the best ways possible.
And that sounds incredibly fun and exciting. And I think probably to feel that way or to achieve that success, I get a sense, Jacob, I've known you for a little while, that you have a great attention to detail and you like to get into the weeds. And so you mentioned a few things about the Vehicle Operations Center and the finances being stable. Was that part of bringing this along? So, like stabilizing those elements of the operation, and your oversight and level of accountability, but then sort of let a breath of fresh air into the ability to redesign, rebrand, and do some of the more fun community elements.
It was. So, looking at it strictly from a financial point of view, you can't be over budget.
Right.
So, one of the big keys in this whole thing has been we're not going to go over budget. And I am
Right.
the hardest liner when it comes to that. Anybody in the city, every time I speak with the VIA folks, I say, hey, how's that going to impact the total budget for year one, year two, year three? And so there are these elements that are conversations that really come down to dollars and cents because the city has never had a system that is going to be a $12 million system. So we don't even know what that looks like until VIA comes along and says, hey, this is what it's looking like. And so we're beginning to see the glimpse of it. Now I just
Mm,
want to see it in operation. But that quantifiable importance of we're not going to go over budget, but we're also not going to sacrifice service is that fine line that we constantly have to toe to determine how much can we skirt into one without negatively impacting the other and vice versa. So I think that for me personally, the data from a finance point of view is important. But then again, the data and the ridership, and to see on-time performance, increase to 95 and 98% consistently month to month, to see ridership already increasing, and to be able to track it on a daily basis. If I chose to, I could go in every day and I could see exactly what the ridership is. That is a game changer for everything that we're doing because those metrics are what are defining every decision making point that we have to make. Because when something works and we see that it's improving, that's an easy choice. But when there is a problem, you can go back to the same numbers, look at it again, and begin to micro adjust the general direction that you're trying to get, knowing that the goal is already defined. And so we
Mm.
know what our goal is. And I mean, we're right there on right at the finish line to see it operationalized. Now, that operationalized finish line is actually only the starting line of what, again, we want to be a generational system. I don't want to go back in 5 years and have to redo this. What we are doing this year, I want to last for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever that looks like based on what the city fathers want to see come across. But I think that if we do the good work now, and if we work and hold Via in a place where they do what they do best, then it only bodes well for everybody to have this long-term relationship that impacts all of our community for the next 20 years.
Well, it sounds to me like we have a great partner here and sort of willing to take the accountability and the tough shots that leadership require, but then has a high fidelity for attention to detail, the data, the finances, and the day-to-day operational aspects of the system and monitoring those. And I think that's an element of probably why our partnership is going so well at this point. And then what allows us to sort of propel ourselves into the other aspects that can be more rewarding, like interacting directly with the public and stakeholders and rebranding a system and some of the more entertaining and fun elements of operating a transit system. Now, that being said, I think we're coming up on time, so I want to make sure that we meet our timeline here. My final thought is sort of if you were facing a room full of your peers today, you were at a conference or you're at a seminar, maybe what would you tell them or what advice would you have for them given your experience thus far? What sort of advice do you have?
So, in reaching out to other transit agencies, other communities, other cities that have similar problems, what I'm finding is that there's no one answer to transit. It's all a matter of knowing what your community needs. Every community has a different need. Knowing what that is, and like I had said earlier, know where you are, know what your goal is, and then figure out the way to reverse engineer from the goal back to where you are now. And I think it kind of helps path it out to those things that you need. And then set some real tough milestones for yourself
Mm.
that only you, if you are serious about doing it, are going to be able to commit to and get to on time, on budget, and be able to answer to the policymakers. For instance, like in the city of Mobile, of course, it's the city council to be able to get up in front of the city council or on a podcast like this or in front of the media, which I'll do after this podcast, and speak intelligibly about all things transit no matter when somebody asks you to do it. You just get up and you have to be able to know it backwards and forwards and live it, eat it, drink it, breathe it as much as you can. And knowing that the goal is worth every effort that you put in.
Well, congratulations. I think this is a tremendous story. I'm really looking forward to the rollout of the new system in July and the rebranding and the announcement. So I will be following, and I hope our listeners follow along as well. Now that I think of it, it would be wonderful to have another conversation with you in maybe 10 to 12 months and check in and see how things are going again with all the work that you're doing. So I just want to say thank you for joining us today. I think the city of Mobile has an incredibly bright future, and VIA is very proud to be your partner and walk along or drive alongside you in this journey. I've been in a lot of city halls. I've worked for 5 or 6 different mayors, and I think I have an affinity for how hard it can be to take on this responsibility, these leadership roles, to pull back that accountability and then lead out and restructure an RFP. And it just sounds like you have a tremendous team there. It took a lot of guts, and we're proud to be your partner. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Best of luck. And I look forward to monitoring the media and seeing what happens in July. I can't wait.
Sounds great. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Appreciate
All
it.
right, Jacob, keep up the great work.
Thanks. Have a good one.